Greetings everybody, welcome back to C&S Corvettes in Sarasota, Florida. This is your buddy Lyle with his Friday podcast. We are in one of my favorite times of the year right now. Spring has sprung, birds are singing, and we are into Corvette buying and selling season. Mostly buying because everybody who has been, especially people up north who've been cooped up for 6 months, want to go out and drive a cool car on a sunny day and get the breeze in their hair, if they have hair. And never mind. But there's 5 things, count them, 5, that you're going to need to do if you go out and buy one of these cars that has just come out of hibernation, especially if it's a car that somebody spent their winter months working on to get it ready to sell. Before I get too deep into that, I want to remind you guys to like, subscribe, hit the bell, do all the things down here on the bottom of the screen that allow us to continue to bring you hopefully interesting and informative information that helps you enjoy your Corvette ownership experience to the very maximum. That done, moving on. 5 things that you want to do to any Corvette that's new to you, especially one, usually older cars, that have just gone through a rejuvenation process over the winter months in preparation for selling. A warning about that in general. We have a fairly good name and a fairly broad reach when it comes to selling used original parts for Corvettes, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all that stuff, which is awesome. The number of calls I get starting in about October for guys up north who have bought a car and they're going to spend their winter months in their heated garage restoring it, looking for parts. And the key phrase is, hey, I'm just fixing it up to sell it. Read that. I want the least expensive, most ugly, most damaged part that will still kind of sort of function for short money that I can get my hands on so I can make this car run and drive. So come springtime, I can sell it, make a profit, and indirectly make it somebody else's problem. Now that we've established that, let's assume you've just bought a car from a gentleman who has just redone it. And you are driving home, big smile on your face, thrilled. That's awesome. There's no better feeling. However, the first thing you need to do before you start driving it out to the lake on Saturday, before you show it off to all your neighbors, you need to get it to somewhere that you can put it up on a lift. And you need to get under that car with somebody who knows what they're doing, and you need to review the following 5 things. Number 1, the first thing you're going to look at are the brake calipers. You need to make sure that they are not leaking. You need to make sure that they are actually secured to the car. You're going to hear this over again as I go through this list so many times, and we just had one in this week. Cars come in here with major safety equipment, like, brakes and steering. So loose, it will kill you. They are, things finger tight that are supposed to be torqued down with both arms and a torque wrench. Even the ones, a lot of these things on the steering especially have little places where you put cotter keys through the castle nut to lock them in place. These things have cotter keys installed beautifully, but the nuts aren't tight. So now you look at it and you go, whoop, it's got a cotter key in it, must be right. It isn't. Every one of the major components has to be checked. I digress. Brake calipers, make sure that they are tight, make sure they are not leaking. Number 2, right next to those, your brake lines and your brake hoses. Make sure that they are routed correctly. Make sure that all the fittings are tight, and make sure that they're in good condition. Specifically, you want to make sure that you don't have any rusty brake lines. You want to make sure that your brake hoses, especially on the front, weren't installed by somebody who didn't know what they were doing, and as they tightened them, instead of just being a nice clean hose going from the caliper to the junction on the body, it's now spiraled like this because of how they tightened it down. And that means that every time you turn the wheel full lock to full lock, that spiral tightens out and crimps and weakens the hose, could possibly break the hose, and certainly in a panic situation where you had to lock the wheel, could very well lead to no brake action, which is very, very bad, at least on the fronts, and those are kind of important front wheels when you're trying to avoid a collision. Number 3, make sure your fuel system, whether it's carbureted, fuel injected, whatever, start at the gas tank filler cap and work your way forward with a flashlight with a knowledgeable person. Make sure that any of the fuel lines and hoses are not pinched. Make sure no fuel is leaking, especially at the back, because in most Corvettes, the gas tank sits right above the exhaust. So if you even have a minuscule leak and it drips on a hot exhaust, you're going to have what we like to call Corvette flambe, and nobody wants to see that. The other thing I see on fuel systems oftentimes is incorrect materials. You may ask me what I mean by incorrect materials. Garden hose used for fuel line. I'm not kidding. Seen it twice. Garden hose. That is not a good thing. So review the system from the tank all the way up to where it goes into the engine. Make sure that it's tight, clean, not rusty, and the correct materials. Fifth, you want to take a good hard look at the battery. This sounds weird, but trust me, on a bunch of these cars, especially the ones where the battery isn't really easily looked at or accessible, like the C3s where the battery's in a well behind you as the driver, or the C4s where it's kind of sitting down inside the left-hand fender, and oh yeah, there's the battery, it's fine. All of these places that the battery is installed have specific hold downs that once the battery's in place, you run a bolt or two down through these hold downs to secure the battery so it's not flopping around as you drive. You want to make sure that whoever did that car actually put that in place so your battery isn't flopping around while you drive, which could be a very, very bad thing. While you're doing that, you're also going to take a very close look at your battery cables. Make sure that they are not frayed. Make sure that the cable, oftentimes, especially on the older cars, you have that lead kind of pincher at the end with a bolt that you tighten down around your nub coming up from your battery. And then there's a clamp here that holds the wires, from the actual copper wires from the cable. What happens with age is those will pull back and you won't be getting good contact even though this is tight on your battery. Make sure that those are good. Also, check your battery grounds, especially on C3s. Make sure that your grounds are connected, clean, not rusty, all of that, because the car isn't going to run right if you don't. Once you've done all of that stuff, then you want to do the other nominal things. Let's assume that the car you just bought, all of this 5-step checklist was perfect. Awesome. You're still going to want to make sure that you change all your fluids, be it power steering, coolant, transmission, differential, especially the brake fluid. Make sure that's all clean, flushed, and new. And then you want to go get your car aligned, because however good the guy was who did the car, I doubt he had an alignment rack in his garage. You want to align your car before you start driving it for the summer. If you follow these 5 steps and use just a modicum of common sense, you're going to avoid any serious, holy crap, I'm going to die moments, I hope. But be aware, not everybody who builds these cars is professional, knowledgeable, detail-oriented, competent, has good vision. I mean, I can go on. Just cover your bases. It's the best insurance you could possibly buy on a new to you, especially older vehicle. I hope you find this useful. I'll be interested to hear. I'll tell you what, if you've got stories about some of the things you've seen under cars, go ahead and leave them in the comments down here. I'd love to hear about them, because there's no better story than a you won't believe this story about cars. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.